It's 1849 in rural Ireland, 5 years into a catastrophe of epic proportions. The Irish potato famine. 1 million will die. Another million forced to flee their homeland. Among those seeking a brighter future are the parents of a child destined to forever transform the role of the laity in the Catholic Church.
Father McGivney's father and his mother were both potato famine migrants. Most Irish ended up in cities working in some form of factory work. And Father McGivney's father ended up in Waterbury, Connecticut, and he was a molder in a brass factory. Catholics were at the very bottom of the social ladder.
Waves of Irish immigrants swelled the Catholic population in northeastern cities, and waves of anti-Catholic sentiment greeted them. One of the perennial questions in 19th century America was whether immigrants coming to America from Catholic countries could be both faithful Catholics and at the same time loyal Americans. Father McGivney's own youth was marked by the clear memory of the struggles of his immigrant parents.
As a parish priest serving at St. Mary's Church in New Haven, Connecticut, Father McGivney witnesses the dire situation facing Catholic immigrants, forced to work the most dangerous jobs, and with no form of social safety net. Husbands and fathers have no means of protecting their family in the event of an untimely death. In 1881, Father McGivney gathers a group of men in the basement of St. Mary's and shares with them his vision of a Catholic fraternal group bound by the spiritual principles of charity and unity. This gives birth to the Knights of Columbus.
The first goal of the Knights of Columbus was to provide this kind of self-help social safety net that thousands of working men and their families desperately needed, especially as the Industrial Revolution was transforming American cities. The other aspect of Father McGivney's vision was defending the Catholic Church at a time of great prejudice against Catholics. This approach was extraordinarily popular, and in less than 25 years, the Knights of Columbus was invited to Canada, Mexico, and the Philippines.
World War I starts in 1914. America enters in 1917. There are a lot of German Catholics, and so there's a lot of suspicion about their loyalty. We're fighting on the side of England. Well, England is the enemy of Ireland at that time. And so there's this question of whether the Irish in America are really interested in fighting alongside the English. Well, what the Knights do, they create this thing called the Knights' Huts.
The KFC huts were locations where servicemen could experience wholesome activity on their off hours or when they had time for rest and relaxation. By the end of World War I, nearly 160 Knights of Columbus facilities had been established in the United States, in France, and even at the Minerva Hotel in Rome. They operated under the banner, "Everybody welcome, everything free," while other organizations also operated similar facilities. When the Knights of Columbus said everybody, we meant everybody. We were the only organization that did not refuse anyone on the basis of race or religion, and that included African Americans. 30 years before the U.S. Army integrated, we were integrating the U.S. Army.
These hospitality huts and recreation centers engendered enormous goodwill. This is really what put the Knights on the map. And word gets back to the Pope.
In 1920, in recognition for their wartime service, a delegation of 235 knights, led by Supreme Knight James Flaherty, traveled to France as guests of honor. After a day in Paris, the knights journeyed to Metz to present a statue of the Marquis de Lafayette to the people of France. Marshal Foch, the supreme Allied commander during the First World War, leads knights to Mass in the Old Cathedral, with French troops marching in the order's honor. For the knights, the presentation of the statue represents a capstone of patriotic effort that had won for them the high regard of the French government and highlights the long history of friendship between the two countries. Afterwards, Supreme Knight Flaherty presents to Marshal Foch the jeweled baton from the Knights of Columbus. Marshal Foch accepts the statue in the name of France and the baton as a tribute from America and the Knights. At the base of the Lafayette statue, France decorates the officers and directors of the Knights of Columbus. They then make their way to Rome for a historic encounter with Pope Benedict XV.
In quell'occasione i cavalieri di Colombo chiesero al Papa: Santità, cosa possiamo fare per lei? E il Papa disse: io sono qui in Vaticano, ma fate qualche cosa per i miei ragazzi di Roma.
Lui suggerì che, dato che la gioventù cattolica romana era molto povera e c'era un certo sentimento anticattolico che stava emergendo, di realizzare dei centri sportivi dove i ragazzi potevano praticare sport per l'appunto, rimanendo in un ambito cattolico.
Benedict XV was aware of what the Knights had done for soldiers during the First World War and the good influence that they had had in that way. And he was aware of the marvelous activities of the Knights in the United States. He had great respect for the Knights of Columbus, which is why he invited them to do this.
La città è stata costruita quasi 3.000 anni fa. 3.000 anni fa la necessità dei campi da gioco non c'era, quindi ovviamente le strade sono strette, gli spazi per i ragazzi non esistono. Ecco perché è stata un'intuizione riuscire a trovare questi spazi ancora disponibili nel tessuto urbano della città e preservarli.
The athletic centers required working closely with both the Vatican and the city of Rome. Past Supreme Knight Edward Hearn moved to Rome to oversee construction of the new athletic centers. Soon a new partnership was forged with an extraordinary Roman, Enrico Galeazzi. Galeazzi became the architect for each of the athletic centers. He was also a pivotal figure in the Vatican and our own Knights of Columbus representative in Rome for more than 6 decades.
I campi attualmente in attività dei Cavalieri di Colombo sono 5. Il campo del Benedetto XV è composto da una bella palazzina dell'epoca, un campo da calcio a 11, un campo da calcio per 5 persone, un altro per 7 persone e un campo da basket. Un altro campo molto importante è il campo di Valle Giulia, che è stato dedicato proprio al conte Galeazzi ed è composto da un campo da calcio a 8 e 2 campi da calcio a 5, tutto in erba sintetica. Il campo del Lungotevere Flaminio è composto da un campo da calcio a 11, uno da calcio a 8, 2 campi da tennis e un campo da calcio a 5. È molto famoso, è stato completamente illuminato recentemente. L'altro campo, il più nuovo di questi campi, è il campo di Primavalle, che è stato realizzato negli anni 50, subito nell'immediato dopoguerra. È famoso perché ha un campo di calcio a 11 regolare, anch'esso uno dei più grandi che abbiamo, al Pio XI, che è il centro che ha la bella vista sulla cupola di San Pietro. I campi di gioco sono diventati presto parte della città. Chiunque ha giocato a calcio a Roma è sicuramente passato sui nostri campi.
Sono stati un tramite, devo dire, unico, che ha consentito di poter avere questi impianti sportivi che altrimenti Roma non era in condizione di farseli sia per ragioni economiche sia per ragioni di strutture. Ma il ricordo era di una grande invidia che tutti avevano nei confronti di coloro che potevano utilizzare a tempo pieno o non a tempo pieno questi impianti. A Roma non era abbondante l'attrezzatura di carattere sportivo, quindi diventavano dei posti veramente privilegiati.
Fascism has been Mussolini's dream for 7 years. Now the March on Rome. His movement numbers 1 million members, including uniformed black shirts, and Mussolini successfully forces his leadership on the Italian king and people.
The rise of fascism in Italy presents challenges for the Knights of Columbus in Rome. In 1931, Mussolini nationalizes the athletic centers. However, Enrico Galeazzi soon successfully negotiates a reopening under Knights of Columbus control.
Questi campi dei Cavalieri di Colombo hanno continuato a funzionare durante l'epoca fascista, quando nessuna organizzazione poteva funzionare se non l'organizzazione fascista per i giovani. Neanche i Boy Scouts, neanche l'Azione Cattolica, solo i campi dei Cavalieri di Colombo.
As the Knights contend with a fascist government in Italy, its work in Mexico is being honored by Pope Pius XI. The Pope issues an encyclical praising the Knights for defending the faith during the Mexican government's anti-Catholic violence. Leaders of the Knights of Columbus meet with President Coolidge, asserting pressure that helps end the conflict in 1929. However, despite gaining influence and respect internationally, the Knights still struggle against prejudice at home. Knight of Columbus Al Smith faces a resurgent KKK and opposition to his faith during his 1928 presidential campaign. And continued anti-Catholicism prevents formal diplomatic relations between the United States and the Vatican. Enrico Galeazzi, a lifelong friend of Eugenio Pacelli, who in 1939 becomes Pope Pius XII, helps bridge that divide.
La loro amicizia andò avanti sempre, divenne sempre più profonda e la fiducia che aveva Papa Pio XII nel conte Galeazzi era massima, a tal punto che era lui che trattava quasi tutte le vicende dello Stato del Vaticano, in anni molto difficili quali la guerra.
During World War II, the United States did not have diplomatic relations with the Holy See. Yet we had a need for a lot of contact and communication. So it was a very precarious situation. And there was one account with the Knights of Columbus. He was able to bring about some critical communications.
Beh, di fatto questo contatto consentì un rapporto che in quel momento non esisteva e non poteva esistere per ragioni diplomatico-politiche. Quindi dobbiamo dire che la provvidenza si è servita di questo strumento per aiutare in fondo sia Roma e sia anche il Vaticano stesso, perché le condizioni di non comunicabilità erano nocive per gli uni e per gli altri.
Below lies Rome. The plains follow the river Tiber, winding around strategic railroad yards and war plants. The Italians have been warned by leaflets dropped from Allied planes. Now, bombs.
Quello del 19 luglio ci furono ben 112 bombardieri che sganciarono 956 bombe, i morti furono quasi 1500, per cui fu un evento che ferì profondamente la città di Roma e i romani.
The Pope asked Enrico Galeazzi to carry a letter to the President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, an appeal on behalf of the Holy Father to spare the city of Rome from the scourges of war, meaning bombing. And the appeal was actually answered and listened, because as a matter of fact, there were no serious damages after that.
While Rome is spared the fate of many European cities, the end of the war leaves the city facing massive food shortages. The Knights of Columbus work with the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration and other organizations to provide much-needed relief.
Venivano sfamate circa 400.000 persone al giorno nei centri sportivi dei Cavalieri di Colombo e soprattutto per i bambini che ovviamente non avevano da mangiare e di conseguenza la popolazione ne risentiva in modo molto rilevante di questa mancanza.
Nel 1944 io andai ai Cavalieri di Colombo e fu una salvezza non solo per quell'estate, perché da allora è stato il punto di riferimento dei giochi, degli incontri, delle amicizie. Io invitavo tutti gli amici e quello faceva l'avvocato, l'assessore, il deputato, ma il portantino. Per cui i cavalieri erano un superamento del ceto, del censo, delle classi.
The second half of the 20th century witnessed the greatest explosion in global communications in history. And so in 1975, we agreed to fund the satellite transmission of major Vatican events. These transmissions are now a hallowed tradition in hundreds of millions of homes around the world. The Knights of Columbus is proud to have been instrumental in supporting the Pope in pioneering this successful new form of evangelization.
Na to wsparcie oczekiwały kościoły Trzeciego Świata, których zainteresowanie było bardzo wielkie Watykanem. Celebracjami, zwłaszcza Boże Narodzenie, Wielkanoc i inne uroczystości. A nie mieli możliwości finansowych. Stolica Apostolska prosiła rycerzy Kolumba, aby przyszli z pomocą, żeby mogły te transmisje dotrzeć do tych kościołów. I tu na pewno wielka wdzięczność ze strony Stolicy Apostolskiej.
We thank the Knights of Columbus for your collaboration in our television apostolate. Assisted by your generosity, we have been enabled to proclaim the Lord of Jesus Christ directly in millions of homes.
Il centro televisivo vaticano è nato appunto durante il pontificato di Giovanni Paolo II. È cresciuto all'inizio in modo abbastanza modesto. In quegli anni col centro televisivo vaticano sentì il bisogno di questa regia mobile, una prima regia mobile che gestiva 7-8 telecamere, diciamo così, per la ripresa di un evento importante. Questo fu proprio un dono, un contributo dei Cavalieri di Colombo.
In a pontificate that spans 26 years, the partnership between the Vatican and the Knights will reach new heights.
1,300,000 people. That is a nation. You could found a state. A state, a nation. You could also have the representatives in the United Nations. Nation of Columbus. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members of the Knights of Columbus and the guests here today, I want to begin by saying how grateful I am that you've asked me here to participate in the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the Knights of Columbus. Now, it isn't true that I was present at the first anniversary.
In 1982, at our 100th anniversary convention, we were honored that President Ronald Reagan came and addressed our delegates. We were also blessed that the Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Agostino Casaroli, represented the Holy Father. So our convention became the historic occasion for President Reagan and Cardinal Casaroli to personally and privately meet to lay the groundwork for full diplomatic relations between the United States and the Holy See.
Cardinal Casaroli, who spent all of his life in the service of the Vatican, would have been very much aware of the Knights of Columbus as a natural kind of conduit in which we could present the case for the usefulness of diplomatic relations, and that too received a favorable response with the formal establishment about a year and a half later.
What changed everything in terms of establishing formal relationships between the United States and the Holy See was the close relationship that emerged between President Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II. They were both visionaries, and they believed, unlike most of their contemporaries, that the Soviet Empire was not indestructible.
In support of Pope John Paul II's efforts to liberate Europe from Soviet communism, we collaborated with the Vatican on a groundbreaking international conference on the common Christian roots of the European nations. We made possible the printing and the distribution of its proceedings throughout then communist Eastern Europe.
With the collapse of the walls separating the East and the West, John Paul is struck by a prophetic intuition. Can the walls dividing the wealthy and developed nations of the North from the impoverished and underdeveloped South also be brought down? This is the challenge taken up by the Synod of the Americas in 1997 and the resulting landmark document, Ecclesia in America.
It's a tremendous blessing that Pope John Paul II, Pope Benedict XVI, and now Pope Francis have taken such a strong interest in the future of the Catholic faith in the Western Hemisphere. We have supported many of their initiatives. One of the most important was the 2012 International Congress on Ecclesia in America, sponsored by the Pontifical Commission for Latin America at the Vatican.
The apparition of Our Lady of Guadalupe was a key factor for the evangelization of Latin America. And so we thought that it should be also a key factor for the new evangelization of both North and South America. The bishops, if they don't have hands and feet to bring the good message to the people, they are very much powerless. I think we wouldn't have done the conference without the Knights of Columbus, without their impulse, their suggestion, and their availability to bring the message further.
I Cavalieri di Colombo della nostra commissione siamo stati decisi a chiedere a Papa Benedetto di presiedere per la prima volta la Santa Messa nella festività di Nostra Signora di Guadalupe il 12 dicembre. Il Papa Benedetto ha accettato di presiedere questa messa. Poi il Papa Francesco ha voluto continuare anno a anno al 12 dicembre, che è diventato un grande momento latinoamericano. Dunque penso che ha fatto il meglio possibile per promuovere questa devozione in America Latina e in Vaticano e nella Chiesa universale.
The image of Our Lady of Guadalupe demonstrates the power of visual symbols to inspire faith and devotion. In Rome, the Knights of Columbus help fund the restoration of precious Vatican art in service to the Pope and to similarly inspire the devotion of the faithful.
Restaurando opere d'arte quali quelle che decorano la Basilica di San Pietro, in un certo senso si compie un'operazione di salvaguardia di opere d'arte universali che hanno un significato veramente universale. Quindi il supporto dei Cavalieri di Colombo credo sia stato fondamentale.
Questo patrimonio universale dell'arte, della storia, ma anche delle testimonianze di fede, sono un patrimonio che noi abbiamo come missione di tutelare, di tramandare alle generazioni future. E l'azione che hanno fatto e che fanno i Cavalieri di Colombo in questo senso è esattamente l'idea di restaurarle, l'idea di riportarle alla luce.
I Cavalieri di Colombo sono gli interlocutori giusti per questo tipo di lavoro, perché condividono le medesime finalità, cioè un qualche cosa che possa contribuire a vivificare e ad accendere la devozione. Ecco, questo è un po' il senso di questi lavori dei Cavalieri di Colombo. In 40 anni 16 grandi interventi di restauro, dalle grotte vaticane alla Basilica, alla necropoli, una tomba della necropoli vaticana, fino appunto alla facciata della Basilica. Ci sono restauri anche di opere d'arte, Madonne e crocifissi. Nel 2012 viene restaurata il veneratissimo dipinto della Madonna della Colonna, nota anche come Mater Ecclesiae. Questa Madonna raccolse da subito grande devozione nell'antica basilica. È una Madonna molto importante per la storia della Chiesa. E a questa Madonna era devotissimo Giovanni Paolo II. La prima immagine ad essere portata in San Pietro dalla Basilica Vecchia alla Basilica Nuova è la Madonna del Soccorso, restaurata dall'Ordine dei Cavalieri di Colombo. Questo restauro viene dedicato appunto a Papa Francesco, quindi è il primo restauro di Papa Francesco nella Basilica Vaticana. Ma tutto viene fatto per vivificare la devozione a San Pietro, no? Ma la devozione, ecco, a Maria e al nostro Signore.
In 2010, the Knights helped fund an updated mobile unit capable of broadcasting in HD. This need arises following the massive turnout and global attention for the funeral mass of Pope John Paul II. In 2010, the Knights are also celebrated for 90 years of work in Rome, with a square named in its honor, Largo Cavalieri di Colombo, and an exhibit in Rome's Capitoline Museum. The exhibit builds new bridges between the United States and the Eternal City.
Un ricordo bellissimo, quello del Dream of Rome. Siamo riusciti a portare negli Stati Uniti i grandi capolavori in musei, in istituzioni museali di grande rilevanza, la National Gallery di Washington, con la Venere Capitolina, siamo andati a San Francisco con la Medusa del Bernini e ancora a Boston col Bruto Capitolino. Per conchiudersi con quella straordinaria operazione è stato restaurato e poi portato a Malibu. Il gruppo marmoreo del leone che azzanna il cavallo. Come posso dimenticare l'interesse soprattutto e l'incanto con cui le nostre opere venivano ammirate dal pubblico statunitense.
The enduring symbol of a now century-long partnership remains the 5 Knights of Columbus athletic centers. From the premier soccer team, AS Roma, to to the physically and intellectually disadvantaged of the Vicari Institute. To Filipino immigrants seeking mutual support, the Knights of Columbus continues to serve the people of Rome.
I Cavalieri di Colombo sono stati i primi che hanno creduto nella capacità dello sport dei nostri ragazzi e mi hanno spronato a creare la squadra di calcio. Quindi abbiamo avuto la possibilità di giocare nei campi dei Cavalieri di Colombo, di condividerne anche i valori dell'uguaglianza, i valori dell'aiuto, i valori dell'assistenza attraverso lo sport.
Here in Rome, there are about 50,000 Filipinos. We are so grateful that we're allowed to use the Knights of Columbus Pius XI Sports Complex. We can use all the facilities there. Of course, the center is the Holy Eucharist. It is a very beautiful venue for the Filipino migrants here to be together.
100 years ago, a relationship is born out of charity. Today, it continues to thrive under Pope Francis, thanks to a common purpose: to go to the peripheries. The Knights respond to a devastating earthquake in Haiti by providing prosthetic limbs and rehabilitation for children. And when ISIS begins a genocide against Christians in the Middle East, the Knights take a stand, pushing for legal protection of the persecuted and raising tens of millions in humanitarian support.
Knights of Columbus are the guards of our faith. When time of crisis and suffering was there, you came to help and to support and to make sure that we will walk the journey together. And when Cardinal Parolin visited Erbil, he really appreciated the work of the Knights. I could see that the Knights of Columbus have a merciful model approaching the suffering people the way that Pope Francis would like to see.
As an American who spent my life here in Rome, I'm very proud in some way to be identified with the Knights of Columbus because they represent that spirit of generosity and that spirit of willingness to help where needed. Pope Francis emphasizes that reality is more important than ideas. And by concrete expressions of this solidarity with those who are most in need, I think the Knights of Columbus exemplify what the Pope has in mind.
I think the Knights deserve gratitude from the Church in Rome. 100 years, it's a patrimony. The Knights are a patrimony of the Church, a lay patrimony of the steady, faithful commitment of support to the bishops and to the priests.
In his first encyclical, Deus Caritas Est, Pope Benedict XVI wrote that we need to cultivate a heart that sees where love is needed. Such a charitable heart was at the center of Father McGivney's founding of the Knights of Columbus. It is his legacy, and it continues still. Pope Francis has called for Catholics to become missionary disciples and to transform our parishes into fraternal communities. This is a calling especially meaningful to the Knights of Columbus, dedicated as we are to the principles of charity, unity, and fraternity.
Dalla loro fondazione i Cavalieri di Colombo hanno dimostrato incondizionata devozione al successore di Pietro. Nel nostro mondo segnato da divisione e disuguaglianze, il vostro generoso impegno nel servire tutti i bisognosi offre, specialmente ai giovani, un'ispirazione importante per superare la globalizzazione dell'indifferenza e costruire insieme una società più giusta e inclusiva.
As we reflect on these past 100 years in Rome, we have sought after just such a heart that sees, in the hope that in our service to the Holy Father and the people of Rome, we have strengthened the fraternal bonds on our journey together as we step now into the next 100 years.